Good evening. Welcome to the regular City of Sugar Land City Council meeting for Tuesday, August the 27th. Our first item is public comment. Anybody wanting to talk on one of the agenda items not listed as a public hearing is invited to do so at this time. If you want to speak on one of the public hearing items, then when I call that agenda item, I'd ask that you come up at that time. So anyone on any one of the items, which would be 3A or B, that want to speak on one of those items. Hearing now, we're going to go ahead and move to 2, public hearing. Public hearing is scheduled for 5:30, so we're okay. 2A, to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the 2019 tax year proposed property tax rate for the City of Sugar Land. Ms. Jennifer Brown, our Director of Finance. Jennifer.
Good evening. We are here this evening for the fiscal year 20 or tax year 2019 proposed tax rate. I'd like to start with just a brief overview of the fiscal year 20 budget. As you all are aware, we have just wrapped up our budget workshops, and they are the result of months of discussion that we've been having with City Council on the proposed budget and the priorities for fiscal year 20. The emphasis for the budget was items that directly benefit residents and enhance the quality of life in Sugar Land, such as increasing our funding for infrastructure rehabilitation, such as streets, sidewalks, facilities, parks, and drainage, and continuing our investment in technology to enhance traffic and mobility responsiveness, and supplementing our traffic safety resources. As we have consistently had the second lowest tax rate in the state for cities our size, we've recently also increased the homestead exemption to help balance the taxable value between residential and commercial and further achieve the 31% of value from the commercial properties, which was a council goal measure that was identified several years ago. So the direction that City Council made the decision in June to raise the homestead exemption helped us to accomplish that objective. But overall, the city's portion of the tax bill has consistently made up around 15% of the total tax bill historically. To date, the City Council has had a record vote on the proposed tax rate on August 8th. The notice of proposed rate was published on August 14th. The proposed rate is 33.2 cents. It funds the fiscal year 20 budget and CIP, including the completion of the remaining 2013 voter-approved bond projects and the CO-funded projects within the capital improvement program. This rate does not include the impact of any of the November bond election projects. That would be a future year impact. We calculated the truth in taxation calculations as part of the notice of the proposed tax rate. Those figures are seen here, and you can see last year's tax rate, the effective tax rate, which is the tax rate that raises the same amount of revenue from properties taxed in both years. And even just to raise the same amount of revenue is an increase to the nominal tax rate. And the rollback rate is the amount that allows for up to an 8% increase in maintenance and operations, and we are below that limit with our proposed rate of 33.2 cents. Property tax gets deposited both into the general fund and the debt service fund, and you can see here that of the total revenues in the general fund, property tax makes up about 33% of revenue, and in the debt service fund, it makes up 72.4% of revenue. The average residential property tax bill is roughly 15.7% comes from the city, and this is with the increase in the homestead exemption and the proportionate exemptions from the other taxing entities. And then if you live in an in-city MUD with a lid, then the city's portion of the tax bill decreases even further to around 10%. And as you can see, that the city's portion of the bill is even less than the lid and the MUD are. Excuse me. The tax rate for 2019 with the 12% homestead exemption results in an average residential tax bill of $1,096, which is an increase of $24 or 2.23% from last year, and that is a combination of the increase in the homestead exemption and the proposed tax rate, and that allows us to target the impact to homeowners from that exemption increase. So this is the first public hearing on the proposed tax rate. We will have a second public hearing on September 3rd at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. The tax rate will then be adopted on September 17th at 5:30 p.m. here at City Hall. And that would occur here in the council chamber. That has to happen after the fiscal year 20 budget is adopted by ordinance. At this time, staff recommends City Council receive and hear all persons wishing to speak on the 2019 proposed tax rate. While we were not allowed to place this link in the notice of the proposed tax rate that was published, we did promote on the website, excuse me, sorry. My voice is not cooperating. We did promote on the website the opportunity to comment online, and we did not receive any comments through this process. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. At this time, we're going to open the public hearing to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the 2019 tax year proposed property tax rate for the city of Sugar Land. First call. Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We're going to move on to item number 2B. Receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed 2019 assessment for properties located in the Enclave at River Park Public Improvement District. Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Mayor. All right, so the second public hearing today is for the Enclave at River Park Public Improvement District, or PID, I will say, so I don't have to keep saying Public Improvement District. This district was created by the city in 2014. And at that time, City Council approved the district service and assessment plan. This district serves 139 homes, so it's a very small neighborhood, and the assessments are made based on the platted lot, so there will be no additional lots that will be subject to this assessment. By electing to create a PID versus a traditional MUD, the city eliminated an extra layer of government because the City Council serves as the board for the Public Improvement District. So we have eliminated an extra layer of government, consultants, et cetera, extra costs because we're all managing it internally. So we've improved efficiency. So based on the agreements, the city reimbursed the developer of Enclave at River Park $2.125 million in January of 2019. In the tax year 2018 is when the threshold was met for the reimbursement. So we made that reimbursement through a combination of cash that we had accrued through prior year assessments and the issuance of debt, which will be repaid over a 15-year period. And since we were able to shorten the repayment term versus our traditional repayment of 20 years, at the end of the 15 years, this assessment will go away. This assessment also is decreasing this year, I'm pleased to say. It is a 24% decline from last year. The assessment will be $740 per lot. Last year it was $970 per lot, so it's about a 24% decrease. And we anticipate in the future that this assessment will continue to decrease as the city is putting in 50% of the property taxes that we collect on the properties in this area. So as the properties continue to develop and the values go up, the city's contributions will go up and the assessments will go down. The assessments are included on the property tax statements that are billed by Fort Bend County. As required, we mailed notice of public hearing to all property owners in the district and included the proposed assessment. Here we also had in the notice, we were able to put in the notice the option to submit comments online, and we did receive 2 comments in opposition from homeowners. I reached out to both property owners. I was able to actually talk to one of them and help them better understand the purpose of the assessment, and was able to provide a written explanation to the other one, even though I was not able to reach them by telephone. So the recommendation will be to hold a public hearing, and we will have first reading of the ordinance to set the assessment on the agenda for September 3rd, with second reading on the 17th. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing to hear any person desiring to be heard on the proposed 2019 assessment to the Enclave at River Park Public Improvement District. First call. Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We're going to move on to item number 3, workshop. 3A, review of and discussion on proposed amendments to Chapter 3, Article 8, smoking ordinance, adding provisions related to e-cigarettes and Senate Bill 21, and amendments to Chapter 3, Article 4, food ordinance, regarding dogs in outdoor dining areas related to Senate Bill 476. Nicole Solis, our Assistant Director of Environmental and Neighborhood Services. Nicole.
Good evening, Mayor,
Good
City
evening.
Council. Today, we are going to be covering 2 ordinance modifications that were identified by the Environmental and Neighborhood Services Department. During the 86th legislature, we had a large number of employees looking at a massive number of state bills, trying to find what those impacts would be to the city. So again, we did find 2 ordinances that would need to be modified. We did include some information on a memo that recently went out to City Council regarding those 2 changes. So we'll start with the smoking ordinance. We did have a council workshop on May 21st of this year. During that workshop, a local high school student gave a presentation regarding e-cigarettes. He is here today. I've been corresponding with him. He is a very dedicated and well-spoken young man, so kudos, Mahul. So at that time, City Council did direct staff to come back with ordinance modifications to the city smoking ordinance, pending the outcome of Senate Bill 21. Now, that did pass, and it increased the minimum age for purchasing use of tobacco products to 21. So, several of our proposed modifications are to update the definition of smoking to include e-cigarette use, and then also update the definition of a tobacco bar to increase that minimum age of entry to 21, and then also including some verbiage regarding e-cigarette use in the violations and penalties section. Now onto the food ordinance. We did do pretty much a complete revamp of our food ordinances last year. It was approved on September 18th, and it included a variance process by which restaurants would be allowed to apply. They would have to comply with certain regulatory requirements to allow for dogs on their patios. Senate Bill 476 does not allow municipalities to enact any ordinances that are more stringent than state law, which obviously ours is. So we need to come back with modifications to that, amend that particular section of the food code to mirror state law, and then also repeal the section in the fee ordinance that is associated with a dog variance. So next steps, we will come back to you in the future with those modifications on first reading, and I would be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Questions, Nicole? Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. Nicole, are we going to try to educate our citizens on the results of these changes?
We are, we do have our website that we're waiting to update the website pending ordinance modifications. So we have that on hold, but it is ready whenever this is finalized.
So it's highlighted on the website as something that's...
On the food website regarding the dogs on patio, because we do have a whole separate web page for that variance process, which we'll obviously need to update.
Would it be worthwhile to include this in the e-newsletter that goes out? The city sends out an e-newsletter to
That's something that we
let
can
them
definitely take a
subscribe
look
to
at.
it. Yeah, okay, thanks. I just think it's better not to be surprised as a resident if the law changes.
Kamesh?
Mayor, this isn't a clarifying question, but just really want to underline and highlight the kudos to the young man, Mr. Maytol, who's sitting in the audience. This is really a great example of a constituent in our community who brought an issue to us, went through the system, had a visit with us, presented to us in local government, listening to what a need, which I think is a great thing, and that I think long-term will be beneficial for our citizens. So I really appreciate it, and he really put in a lot of time and effort in bringing this forward, and along with all the extracurricular things you probably do at Dulles and everything else, you should be really proud of yourself. So thank you.
Thank you.
And again, he has been extremely dedicated in keeping up with where we're at in the process and, trying to stay informed on upcoming council meetings. So definitely.
Jennifer?
So what is the process if you find, or if, I guess law enforcement sees someone under 21 with e-cigarettes or the vape or whatever? I'd like to know the process on that.
Go ahead and have
Chief Robbins is here to answer that question.
I knew I'd get called. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just like with any other, whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, if we see someone under the age that looks under the age, we have the ability at that time to ask them for identification. We still will work with TABC, whether it's with stings like we do currently for tobacco products. The e-cigarette will fall in that same category.
Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission.
I'm sorry?
TABC, Texas Alcohol Beverage
Yes, sir.
Commission.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Nicole, I think you're going to probably bring it back to us. You're going to make whatever changes we need to make and then bring them both back as an ordinance change.
That is correct.
Thank you. Item number 3B, review of and discussion on creation of a citizen task force for the development of a mobility master plan. We have Ruth Lomer, our city planner long range, and Monique Johnson, transportation and mobility innovation manager. Ruth.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. We are here this evening to talk to you about the creation of a citizen task force for the Mobility Master Plan. I'm going to start off by reminding you a little bit about the background of the project, and then Monique is going to talk to you about the creation of the task force, and we'll talk to you about next steps. So the comprehensive plan has a goal for achieving superior mobility in the city. We've also heard through numerous citizen satisfaction surveys that mobility is really the major concern for citizens in Sugar Land. Over the years, we have begun to focus, though, more on moving people and not just moving vehicles. Superior mobility really includes more than just cars. It's multiple modes of transportation. And so we want to provide residents, visitors, and tourists with multiple transportation options to choose from when they're in Sugar Land. So in order to achieve that, we started looking at our process for planning for mobility. Under our current structure, we have our kind of overarching comprehensive plan, and then there are two citywide official master plans that guide mobility. That's the pedestrian and bicycle master plan and the master thoroughfare plan. We also have the comprehensive mobility plan, which is sort of like a master plan, but it's not an official master plan, so it kind of fits under the guiding documents, and then the ITS plan. In the fiscal year 16, we started a strategic project to start looking at these plans and see how we might be able to better coordinate their implementation. And so at that time, staff evaluated some different options and recommended consolidating all of these plans into one mobility plan. So this is what the new structure would kind of look like. You'd have the mobility master plan that would serve as the official master plan, and then the ITS plan, and there could be other guiding documents that are more strategic plans that get updated on a more routine basis that sit outside of that as well. In fiscal year 17 and 18, we continued the strategic project to prepare for that consolidation, and we did so by drafting a list of policy questions that we felt like needed to be addressed in the kind of next iteration of a mobility plan for Sugar Land. We came up with 20 different policy questions, and they were grouped into 4 different themes that you can see here. But what we found was that they were so wide and so deep that it was going to be hard to address them all in one place. And so instead of having multiple plans that that address different modes of transportation. We'll have one plan that addresses all modes of transportation in the mobility master plan, but then we'll also have some lower level plans that will address, be a local plan or a neighborhood or a corridor plan that will look specifically at particular areas of the city. So the mobility master plan will be the high level policy guidance, and then the lower level plans will really get into the nitty gritty of where different transportation programs should be situated within the city. So the alignment of a trail or a bike path will be addressed at that local level, and we can make sure that we are dealing with the neighbors in a particular area to decide where things need to go. In fiscal year 19, we have been working on developing a scope for this project and securing the funding to initiate the mobility master plan development. And so we are moving forward with that in hiring a consultant beginning in fiscal year 20, and then working towards appointing a citizen task force for the plan and beginning plan development. And so we are here to talk to you tonight about the citizen task force, so I'm going to hand it over to Monique so she can tell you about that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So now we'll dive into the creation of the Citizen Task Force for the Mobility Master Plan. So who will be involved? We want to involve the general public. We want to be able to capture as much input as possible on the general mobility interests and needs of the community. The Planning and Zoning Commission is typically involved in our master plan process, so we'll take a final master plan to them, and they would make a recommendation to you guys for the plan's adoption. City Council will be involved throughout the process. We will have periodic workshops and updates with you to get your input. And of course, when the plan is finalized, you will be the ones to adopt the master plan. But like I said, for tonight, we want to focus more so on developing that citizen task force for the plan, and also talk about some of the supplemental groups, which include technical advisors and key stakeholders. So per city policy, City Council is responsible for appointing the Citizen Task Force. The purpose is to get extensive public input during the plan's development. Members on the task force will gain knowledge about mobility concepts and serve as advocates during the plan's development. And then the Citizen Task Force would be the group to make a recommendation for the plan's adoption to City Council. So for the task force membership, we want to have at least 16 members representing diverse mobility interests, so a minimum of 2 from each of the categories shown here. So that would include cyclists, walkers, transit users, seniors, parents of school-age children, people with disabilities, major employers, local businesses, and any others that you would recommend that we include on the task force. The reason why we say at least a minimum of 2 per category is because there may be interests within these categories that differ. So for example, people with disabilities, you may have someone who uses a wheelchair to get around, but you also may have someone who's a caretaker of someone who has a disability, and they would represent that person on the task force because they're familiar with what their needs are as far as mobility. The policy has a requirement that citizen task force members be residents of the city of Sugar Land. So within the resolution that we have an exception to this policy to allow residents of the ETJ and also representatives from major employers and local businesses who may not necessarily be residents of Sugar Land to serve on the task force. So now we'll dive into the recruitment process. Our plan is to invite the general public to apply. We will have 2 information sessions before the application deadline. And so the purpose of these sessions is to talk about the purpose of the task force and as well as the recruitment process, and make sure they have an understanding of the level of commitment that we would expect from the task force members. The application will include questions to learn about mobility interests and needs among the applicants. And then we would also include targeted outreach efforts to nonprofit organizations with mobility interests. So some examples of this would be Shape Up Fort Bend, Keep Sugar Land Beautiful, AARP, and others as well. So once we get all the applications in, staff will create a matrix of applicants, and we would categorize these applicants by mobility interest. And this will be based on the questions that we will have on the application. And so once we get those applications in and develop the matrix, we plan to review those with the IG subcommittee. Now, we would like to get your concurrence on that process tonight, but if we do get your concurrence, we would be back with IG to review those applications. And then IG would be the group to make a recommendation to City Council, selecting a minimum of 2 per mobility interest group, and also selecting a chair and a vice chair for the task force. And then City Council will be the ones to appoint the members, the chair and the vice chair, via resolution. So now we'll talk a little bit about the technical advisors. This would be a support group for the Citizen Task Force, and their purpose is to provide information during those education process and also advise during the plan's development. And so city staff will be the ones that would reach out to these organizations to get representatives. So this will include Fort Bend ISD, Lamar Consolidated ISD, Fort Bend County, HJC, TxDOT, Metro, UPRR, and various city staff from different departments, and any others that council may recommend. We will also reach out to some of our key stakeholders. So, of course, we want to get input during the plan's development from them as well. Some of these representatives may also already be serving on the task force, but we would also reach out in addition to that as city staff to make sure we capture representatives from these groups. So these may be individual schools. We thought about the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council as teenage representatives for the Mobility Master Plan, destination venue operators, the hospitality industry, and then also major employers. So last week, we reviewed our selection process and our recruitment process with the IG subcommittee. They concurred with our process for recruitment. They also identified additional stakeholders to include in the development process, which were the destination venue operators and representatives from the hospitality industry. So we've already incorporated that into our plan for recruitment. So next steps. Tonight, we really would like to get feedback from council on the Citizen Task Force. Specifically, are there any other groups that were not previously represented? Are there any others that you would like to add to that list? And do you want to continue going to IG subcommittee for any future consideration and action on the Citizen Task Force? We also want to get your feedback on any additional technical advisors or key stakeholders that we have not mentioned previously.
Why don't we go through the different questions? Let me start first with, is the council comfortable with staff going through the IG subcommittee for the consideration and action? Carol?
Well, another option would be to do it like we did with the Integrated Water Resources Program or the some of the other programs like the Animal Services, and let, I guess, city council members who have a specific interest do that as opposed to an existing subcommittee. That'd be the only, I guess, alternative.
Other thoughts? Yeah.
One reason why I think it is proposed the way that it is attempted to try to balance proper representation is hard to do when it's coming from individual council members each putting theirs in, and the only time you could talk about it then would be in an open session. So that's a little bit more challenging than being able to work through one of the council committees. Just a limitation.
Mayor, I think it being an off year, if you may, not a session year coming up, IG probably has a little capacity to handle a project like this. So I would support letting IG be the group to handle it.
Okay. Anybody else? That's what we'll do. Let's go to the second question. Are there any other groups that we haven't identified that you would like? Steve?
Sure.
Yeah. I think a couple things come to mind for me. Another way to look at this is users by our big thoroughfares. So somebody that uses 6 all the time, or somebody that uses 90A all the time, or somebody that tries to get to 59 all the time, day, morning and evening. So you got commuters trying to get to our major thoroughfares. It may be one of these groups that meet that, but my recommendation would be that if they don't, find somebody that does. The other thing is, I think people that commute outside of Sugar Land to go to work and inside, I think it would be, those might be two different perspectives. And I would surely include somebody that has to deal with Union Pacific Railroad.
Yeah, I think we did, Steve, on not on the citizen task force, on the advisory task force, on the technical advisors.
No, on the citizens task force. Somebody that has to deal with the railroad.
Somebody who has to get past the railroad every day, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or somebody that has to commute, and somebody has to commute. Now, that may be one of these people.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
could I suggest that we had drivers?
Yeah, that's what
And then
I'm
just indicate the points that Councilman Porter, just to clarify?
We
You're
did,
looking for some diversity in drivers?
Yes.
we did have motors.
Internal commuters, external, outside the city, et cetera. Would that
Yes,
address it?
Thank you very much. And the technical task force, could I see it?
There you go.
Yeah, under the general topic of city staff, I would really think that Sugar Land PD and Sugar Land Fire are big users of our streets and roads, and probably have more information, the big picture, than any one of us, that their input would be important to me.
good point. Other thoughts? Carol?
Yeah, I concur with Councilman Porter that drivers is a very critical a component that needs to be part of the committee, those people, particularly those commuting to work within the city and those commuting to work outside the city.
Anyone else? We'll make a couple thoughts, airport, and then specific businesses in the Sugar Land Business Park.
For the task force specifically? Okay.
Like, for example, Nowco, now Champion X. Michelle?
What do you envision your timeline from getting the task force to bringing something to city council? I know there's a lot of things that have to happen in between, but what kind of timeline are we looking at?
So for the timeline, we are actually looking at coming back to City Council in September, and that would be to approve the resolution. And then once we get that approved, we'll initiate the recruitment process. That will give about a month for the applications deadline. And then we'll go back to IG in November for them to review the applications, look at the matrix, and make their recommendations to council. And then we'll be back for the appointments in January of 2020.
The reason why great, and I'm glad you have this timeline. Thank you very much. You had mentioned MIAC may not fit in because they're done around the May timeframe. Right? They start soon and then they graduate.
So MIAC would be involved throughout the process. So we anticipate this being a 2 to 3 year long process. So we'll have them involved throughout that time period.
Youths like this gentleman that was out there that presented earlier, spoke earlier. We spoke about him. Get more like him.
Well, that's our intent. We
As
want
a
to capture.
utilizer. Very good. Thank you.
Everybody good? Number 4, City Council City Manager reports. 4A, City Council members. Stuart, let's start with you.
Mayor, Councilmember Porter and I had the pleasure to attend the Fort Bend County Mayors and Council Members Association meeting hosted in Fulshire, and we learned a lot about United Way efforts here in the county. And then I had the pleasure of hosting HCSS, one of our large employers in Sugar Land, and an employer that's investing by building a new building just outside of our business park, hosting them and some of their guests at the Smart Financial Center on Saturday night. A good time was had.
Thank you. Ramesh?
You and I hosted, as part of the Economic Development Outreach, the Skeeter Suite. We hosted the legislative representatives. Senator Coco, of course, was in attendance. Representative Miller, Representative Reynolds, and a staff member from Senator Huffman's office. And I thought it was a good opportunity to let them know some of our satisfaction and dissatisfaction with some of their bills that they passed. And hopefully next session things will be a little bit better in our favor. So.
Thanks, Ramesh. Carol?
Attended a SL4B meeting where we reviewed a application from Commonwealth for a joint CIP project.
Moshe?
Yeah, I prepped last week for dropping my daughter off this weekend to college. And I'm still crying over it, but nope, nothing else to report.
Okay.
There's an election coming up, right? One of the things that I like to just build on what Stuart said, one of the things we learned from the United Way lady is that Sugar Land is somewhat insular in the fact that we all do pretty well in Sugar Land. But there's a lot of people that don't. And we just need to keep in mind that a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. A medical issue or a car problem could sink them. And they're working hard. United Way is to address that, but the problem is large and the resources are small. So if you have a chance to support the United Way in Fort Bend County, it would be a good investment. I met with a couple of residents from Creek Bend subdivision about a house that's been under construction for 3 years. Looks terrible. And coming up, I'll be attending a Eid luncheon.
Thanks, Steve. Jennifer?
Lost my list. I attended with the mayor a Greatwood HOA meeting where we discussed our upcoming bond election. I attended a Benzer Capital Networking breakfast where we had a think tank of outreach into the community of promoting apprenticeships or specializations for young adults. I attended the TML Region 14 meeting in spring, Friday and Saturday, where we talked about hotel occupancy tax and legislative update, and also attended the 100th birthday celebration of First United Methodist Church here in Sugar Land.
Perfect. I'm going to bring up just one other thing. Ramesh mentioned that we had the legislative delegation. That was the state legislators. We also hosted the county the previous Saturday. Rick Ramirez and our staff did a great job of pulling that together. I would also convey to the public that we have a speakers bureau, that being members of city council, senior staff members throughout the organization that are available should anybody have questions about the general obligation bond referendum that will be voted on November the 5th of this year. Reach out to us. We can respond with people to answer fact questions about not only the bonds in the process, that being $91 million, about $47 million for drainage, that being $26 million for public safety, $17 million for streets, and about $7 million for animal control. They can be made available to answer questions about what that means and the 3-cent tax rate that comes along with the approval. $45 million of that will be funded within our current tax rate, the proposed tax rate of 332, and then $45 million will be funded with 3 cents. It's effectively a penny for every 15 million in debt. So anybody in the public that would like to have that kind of a presentation, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to visit with you. That's all I have. Motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, City Manager report, Alan.
Yes, sir, just a couple quick things. City offices will be closed Monday, September 2nd for Labor Day. And also, we have scheduled the District 1 Town Hall meeting for Tuesday, September the 3rd. And it's coming up quickly. It'll be at the Imperial Park Recreation Center at 6 p.m.
They rescheduled me into October now.
Okay. That is
New information.
new information.
That was this afternoon, late.
Okay, then let me mark this off of the calendar. We no longer are going to have a town hall meeting on Tuesday, September the 3rd. Apparently, there is a conflict. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that.
Now we can have a motion to adjourn. I've got the motion.